In this video, I want to show you how to replace your fuel tank. So, let's get started. Now to take this fuel tank down, we're going to have to start by removing this shield here, which is not built into the fuel tank straps. Those are the fuel tank straps. These straps right here are actually part of this shield, and we'll have to take those down first. I have this transmission jack here on which I attached a fuel tank support, and I'm going to put just a little bit of pressure on this tank, well, not on the tank, on this shield, so that when I unbolt it, it can just rest on this, and then I can drop it down easily without it falling on my head or me having to support it by myself. So let's take the bolts down for the straps. There are several. I'm going to start with this one, which is next to the drive shaft on the front side. 10mm socket. Now at the back, next to the muffler, there's another one. And on the outside, where the frame is, 2 more on the front side. And 2 more at the back. Now the shield is free, so let's lower it. Slowly go down with it. Perfect. If you're on the ground, you can just use 1 or 2 jacks and balance it. Just lower it slowly. It's not very heavy, but it's large, so make sure it clears the drive shaft. I'm going to lower it all the way down, take it off, and then we'll put the support back up here so we can lower this tank. Now with my support back underneath the tank, let's take the 2 13mm bolts out that hold the straps onto the frame. They're only bolted on one side. On the other side, they're just hooked into the frame. I'll show you in a second. So for now, let's take these out. I sprayed them with rust penetrant, but they're still pretty rusty. Now to take the straps down, you can twist them out, slide them out from their slot in the frame. There you go. If you have a lot of rust buildup in there, go ahead and get that out of there. Do the same with the front strap. There you go. Let's disconnect the hoses off of the filler neck. To do that, you can use an 8mm socket, long extension, sneak up in here and just unscrew these clamps. Looks like this clamp is in poor condition and it's kind of rusted, so even though it does work, I'm most likely going to replace it. There we go. I'm also going to replace that one. Now we can pull these hoses off. Now I'm going to use a pry bar and gently push these hoses off. There's one. I'm just trying to break this one free for now. Okay, so it's kind of broken free. It can stay on for now. We'll pull it off as the tank gets dropped. Let's slowly lower the tank. It's probably on this bigger hose for the filler neck. Hopefully it'll let go. There we go. That just popped free. Continue going down very slowly. The fuel line and everything else is still attached there, connections. So don't go down too far, you don't want to break stuff. Now up top, at the top of the tank, we have to disconnect a few things, one of which is this vent hose here. I'm going to grab a pair of pliers and try to slide this clamp off of here. Get that off. You can grab the hose very gently, give it a twist to break it free, and then you can just slide it off of here, hopefully. There we go. All right, so that's one thing disconnected. Next, we have to unplug the pressure sensor. So press on the tab, which most of the time it's stuffed up with sand. So I'm going to see if I can use a screwdriver to help pry this connector off of here. The lock is kind of stuck. There it goes. All right, Oh yeah, lots of sand. Make sure you shake that out of there. We have another one of these clamps with a hose. This needs to come off. All right, and once that's slid off, break the hose free. There we go. To unplug the fuel pump, you can find the wiring right over here. Looks like it was supposed to be clipped onto the frame, and that is no longer the case, but it's okay. We can work with that. Press the tab, disconnect the pump. This part of the cable stays with it. Obviously it doesn't unplug here. This stays with the vehicle. Now we just have to disconnect these two fuel lines. You have to basically squeeze in these two tabs and then push the lock out. Maybe a pair of pliers would be better for this. Okay, that's one side. Yep, perfect. All right, so that's one line. Watch out, there might be fuel coming out. Give it a couple twists to break it free, and then wiggle the line off. Yep, fuel is coming out. And let's do the same thing to this one over here. This one, however, as you can see, has a lock here, so you have to unlock the lock first, and only then can you do the same thing and push the connector out. There we go. Perfect. That's unhooked. Do the same thing. Wiggle the line and pry it off. There we go. At this point, we can finish lowering the tank. Now to replace this, we're going to grab a pair of pliers, twist it counterclockwise. This will unlock it. What you see here is not fuel. This is all rust penetrant that I sprayed, and I let it sit for about 5 minutes to hopefully prevent this from breaking. Okay, so this is twisted 90 degrees. At this point, I'm going to take a little pry bar. You can use a screwdriver or whatever you have. Gently pry this up. So there's your breather. This is one of the two. There are two of them. The other one is right over here next to the fuel pump, and the procedure is exactly the same. I'm going to twist it, unlock it. Once it stops turning, you can gently pry it up. Pop it right out. As you can see, it's the same exact thing. And to install it, line up the slot, press it down, turn it 90 degrees. And as you can see, it's nice and locked in. Let's remove the pressure sensor. We'll need some pliers. This is pretty stuck in here. Turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise to unlock it. It even says it on here. There we go. I sprayed some rust penetrant, hopes that it would help, but didn't do as much as I was expecting it to. Now you can pull it straight up. To install it, before installation, I put a little bit of silicone paste on the connector. As you can remember, it was pretty gummed up with sand. I'm going to slide it down into its spot, approximately how it was before. Twist it 90 degrees, and there you have it. Now let's remove these two hoses. So loosen up these clamps. I'm replacing these. They're in pretty poor condition. Break the hose free. Be very gentle when you do this. You don't want to break the hose. You just want to break it free. Pop it off the tank. Okay, we'll inspect it, and it doesn't really look that good. The inner lining is still there, but the rubber on the outside is kind of worn out, so I would prefer to replace it, but I guess you could still reuse this. You can always replace it later. Just reach up and over the frame. Now it's time to loosen up this larger filler hose. This clamp isn't too bad, but if I'm going to replace the rest of them, I might as well just replace this one too and get all of them out of the way. Trying to lift it up off the tank. There we go. A little crunchy. Keep in mind, doing this will most likely get debris inside the tank through this filler. So when you transfer over your gas, don't transfer 100% of it over. Just the bottom of the tank is going to be full of debris. Okay. There we go. Now on this new tank, let's put the filler neck hose, the main hose. And like I said, I'm getting a new clamp for this. So I'm gonna put the clamp on, tighten it up. Okay, I'm gonna position the clamp like this so that if this ever has to come off, it can be reached from the top of the tank. Make sure you snug it up, but don't tighten it too much. If you over tighten these clamps, they will strip out and then you'll, well, need a new clamp. I'm gonna put this second clamp on. I'm gonna leave it right here, but this is actually for the other end. I just don't wanna forget it, so I'm gonna put it here and leave it until it's time to put the tank in. Now let's get this hose in. If you're replacing it, by the way, this is a 1/2-inch hose. Slide the clamp on, put the hose all the way on. Now let's snug up the clamp. When you do that, make sure that it's positioned halfway in between the end and the beginning of the fitting. So I'm gonna put it right about here. I'm gonna aim the clamp up so it can be undone from the top of the tank. I can feel that the fitting ends here, so this is perfect. Make sure it's nice and snug. Okay, I'm gonna put on this clamp on the other end just so I can have it already set here, just like this one. And then once we put the tank on, all I have to do is slide these over and clamp on the hoses. We also need to transfer this shield here over to the new tank. So with a pair of pliers, there's a couple tabs here that need to be bent. I guess I have to use this to get it started. Once you straighten these out, you should be able to grab it with pliers, bend it down, and then this will unlock the shield. Okay, that's one. Same to this one over here. And take this shield off, and let's put it on the new tank. Now take this shield, slide it over the new tank. Make sure those two little tabs slide through. They do, that's perfect. I'm using a small brass hammer. I don't want to make any sparks, that's why I'm not using steel. Bend these up to lock the shield in. Perfect. Now let's remove this fuel pump. There are several 8mm headed bolts all around. Remove all of these. I do not suggest using any electric tools. You can use air tools, but electric tools usually have sparks internally. And well, you know what happens when you mix sparks with fuel fumes. All this wetness, by the way, is not fuel, it's rust penetrant. I was hoping it would do something. I don't know, maybe it did. Now that it's all unbolted, pull the fuel pump assembly out. As you slide it out, make sure that your float or the level indicator doesn't get bent or damaged. Otherwise you'll have an inaccurate reading. Oops, there you go. Looks like this one is in, well, not the best of condition. I'm gonna go ahead and slide this back in here. Now let's slide this back into the tank, just like this. I have a new gasket that I lined up underneath here. Make sure you position the pump as it should, with the lines facing out like that. Set it down. If your hardware is in poor condition, I highly suggest replacing it. Mine's in decent condition, it just has some surface rust, so I'm gonna reuse it. I'm holding the pump down so the gasket doesn't move. Now with all the bolts started, let's go ahead and tighten all these up. Make them nice and snug by hand. You don't need to go very, very tight on them. They're small and they could strip the threads. I'm gonna go in a cross pattern, that way the pump can seat itself properly and the gasket can seal up. You don't want any fuel leaks here. Now I'm just gonna go around and double check them all, just feel for them, make sure they're all about the same tightness. Okay, we're ready to bring up the tank. As you bring it up, make sure the filler neck hose on this side goes over the frame. Otherwise it'll get stuck down here and you won't be able to put the tank all the way up. Also try not to get debris in here. That would be good. Now let's plug in the pressure sensor. Make sure it clicks. At this point we can connect the fuel pump. Here's the connector for it. Line it up make sure it clicks, and my securing point on the frame is broken, but typically you'd want to re-secure it. I'm just going to make sure it's tucked up in there. Now let's connect the fuel lines. The red one went towards the front over here. Push it in all the way, make sure it clicks, and lock it. That is very important. If it doesn't lock, that means it's not in all the way. There we go. And this one had that secondary lock, which you want to make sure you press in. Let's connect the other fuel line. Do the same thing for this one. Press it in all the way. Make sure it clicks and lock it. Perfect. Fuel pump is connected. Let's bring the tank up a little more. Now let's plug in this hose over here. Slide it on. Looks like the tank needs to go higher. Make sure it gets pressed on all the way. And then grab some pliers. Actually, I might be able to squeeze this by hand. There we go. Just going to push it back a little bit so I can push the hose on all the way. Make sure it has proper engagement here. That seems alright. Let's bring the clamp closer. Take the clamp and set it down on the hose here. Make sure it's not falling off the end of the hose. This one doesn't sit quite like I want it to, so I'm going to bring it back a little bit. Also make sure it's on the fitting. You don't want it to be off the fitting. This seems perfect right here, so let's do the other vent. Let's reconnect this vent. Slide the hose on. Make sure it goes on all the way. You don't want it to fall off, and you want it to be quite a bit in on this fitting. There we go. That's in all the way. So grab some pliers, and let's put this clamp back. Perfect. So off of the old tank, I was not able to pull off the little pads that it had over here to cushion it up against the frame. So I just took an old fuel pump gasket that I had, cut it up, and I'm going to use this as a pad. It's not the best thing, but it will do the job, and it's not going to soak up moisture and hold it. That's not what you want. You don't want something that will hold the water here and will rot out your tank and your frame. You want something like this, rubber or plastic or whatever you might have, and that will basically drain the water as it collects here. So I put these on the rear here where it makes contact here, as well as on the front right there on that frame rail on the front of the tank. I put another set of those pieces of rubber. Let's continue bringing the tank up until it makes contact with the frame. Right there is perfect. I'm gonna level this jack out. There we go. It's up against the frame. Everything looks good. It's time to put the straps up. Past the tank like this. Obviously, if these are in poor condition, you'd want to replace them. Let's get the other strap in. Make sure it lines up with where it needs to go on the tank, which it does, so that's perfect. I'm going to start with this rearward strap because it lines up better than the other one. Once I have this one somewhat secured into place, I can go back and line up the other one. Alright, I'm not going to fully tighten it yet. Let's go and line up the other one. That's tight. Perfect. I'm going to finish tightening this one by hand so I can actually feel how tight it's getting. Okay. That's nice and tight now. And now I can release pressure off of the fuel tank, and it is held on by the straps. Perfect. Now it's time to bring the shield up, so let's put it all the way up. I'm using my transmission jack with, again, the fuel tank adapter to do this. If you're on the ground, not on the lift, just try to line up the best you can. This one right here happens to line up perfectly on the first try, so I'm going to put the 2 bolts in. I'm not going to tighten any until they're all in, just because I need to be able to move this shield around, and if I tighten just one, it'll stop moving. So I'm going to leave it like this. We'll put the other ones in now. We'll move on to these other ones that go onto the frame. Okay, so these are all in on the frame side. Let's get the other two in, one next to each strap. Since I'm here, I'm going to start with this one. Now remove the support. Now let's secure the two hoses. I'm going to start with this larger one, put the hose clamp. First, just double check that it's in all the way. Go ahead and pull on it, press it onto the filler neck, and this is good. So, like I mentioned, I have a new clamp. Try to position it in a way in which where it tightens, you can still access the adjustment, and also make sure that it's in between where the hose ends and where the filler neck ends. You don't want it close to either ends, otherwise it can risk popping off. Okay, a couple more cranks and that should be good. There we go. Grab this clamp and let's tighten this hose up as well. Nice and snug, perfect.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.